Did the federal government just misplace 21 billion of your tax dollars in a single year?
Misplaced might be a bit too generous. What our sources are showing is a documented systemic failure
A failure in what exactly?
in financial accountability, for one. And it's happening right alongside these, policy strategies that just seem destined to fail the very communities they're supposed to be helping.
Okay, welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to cut through all that bureaucratic fog and really analyze the true cost of government incompetence.
And we have a pretty powerful stack of sources to do it.
We do. We have some explosive audit reports, specifically from the Treasury's Office of Inspector General, and we've combined those with some sharp policy analyses that focus on accountability and the ongoing housing crisis.
And that combination, I think, gives us a really clear picture of where taxpayer money is being wasted, and maybe even why some of these big social policies just aren't working.
So let's start with the big scary number. Where does it come from?
Right, we have to start there. The headline figure, it comes directly from the Department of the Treasury's own internal audit for fiscal year 2024.
Their own audit.
Their own audit. And it shows the Treasury. Well, really, the IRS failed to meet compliance requirements under this critical law. It's called the Payment Integrity Information Act.
PIIA.
PIIA, exactly.
Okay, so PIIA sounds like classic government jargon. For the listener, what does it actually mean to fail PIIA compliance? What's the consequence?
It's basically the law that demands government agencies prove they're not losing huge amounts of money to error or waste. Critically, it says these high-risk programs have to keep their improper payment rate below 10%.
10%, that's the threshold.
That's the line in the sand. If you go over it, it signals a complete failure of your internal financial controls.
So what did the IRS report for their programs? Let's have the core finding.
This is the shocker. 4 major refundable tax credit programs,
Yeah.
all managed by the IRS, reported improper payment rates significantly over that 10% threshold.
And when you add up the dollars.
When you tally it up, just in these 4 programs, we're talking about an estimated $21.4 billion.
Wait, 21 billion with a B.
With a B, $21.4 billion in improper payments in FY 2024 alone. I mean, this isn't a rounding error. This is money that just went out the door without proper verification.
So it could be the wrong amount
or went to someone who wasn't eligible or just shouldn't have been paid out at all.
That is just a colossal number. It feels like a profound breach of trust with the taxpayer. So let's dig into that definition. Improper payment.
Are we talking about straight up fraud, or is it bigger than that?
It's broader, and that's an important distinction. An improper payment is, officially any payment that shouldn't have been made, was the wrong amount, or went to an ineligible person.
Okay.
So while fraud is definitely a piece of the puzzle, it also covers things like administrative errors, clerical mistakes, and even errors made by the people filling out these really complex tax forms.
So the fact that the IRS keeps failing to get these rates below 10%, it just indicates a fundamental inability to manage these programs effectively.
Let's put some names to that $21.4 billion. Which programs are the biggest culprits here?
The largest chunk, by far, comes from the Earned Income Tax Credit, the EITC. This program alone is an accountability nightmare.
What's the rate?
Its estimated improper payment rate hit 27.3%.
Wow.
Which translates to a staggering $15.9 billion lost. I mean, just think about that. More than 1 out of every $4 paid out through the EITC is technically an improper payment.
27%. That's not just a leak, that's a broken dam.
And it gets worse. The American Opportunity Tax Credit, or AOTC, which is supposed to help with college costs, it posted a rate of 27.7%. That's another $1.4 billion.
Okay, so they're all hovering around that same number.
And then the net premium tax credit, which helps with health insurance premiums, it actually had the highest rate of all, 28.5%.
Almost 30 cents on every dollar.
And that's another $0.7 billion. And finally, the additional child tax credit, the ACTC, it just squeaked over the line at 10.7%. But that still represents $3.4 billion wasted.
So those 4 are the reason the Treasury failed its compliance.
Exactly. Billions of dollars leaving the federal coffers without the statutory integrity the law demands.
Now, the government has to have some kind of defense for this. I mean, they can't be surprised when they see a 30% error rate. What's the official explanation?
Well, their defense is pretty technical, a bit bureaucratic, but it's important to understand. They argue that these programs, these refundable tax credits, or RTCs, are just inherently difficult to manage because of how the law is written.
What's the difference? An RTC versus a normal government payment?
So with a traditional payment like a defense contract, the government can verify everything. Eligibility, cost before they cut the check.
Right. Makes sense.
But RTCs often work like a negative income tax. The refund can be more than the person actually owes in taxes. And Treasury management claims the law, as it's written now, prevents the IRS from validating that critical eligibility info before the refund goes out the door.
So they're saying the law forces them to mail the check first and ask questions later.
That is precisely the argument they make. They say these high error rates are because of complex laws and that it's all beyond their control unless Congress gives them new legislative authority.
What kind of authority?
They keep asking for something called math error authority. It would let the IRS just automatically adjust a refund if it sees a clear error based on data they already have without having to do a whole audit after the money is gone.
Okay, so that reframes it a bit. It's not just negligence, it's a systemic design flaw that Congress would have to fix.
Right. Or the waste will just continue.
And this mismanagement is not just these long-running tax credits, is it? The audits show it popping up in the short-term emergency programs, too.
That's the critical link. The lack of control seems to be universal. You look at the pandemic relief programs, the Office of Capital Access, or OCA. They were managing huge programs like emergency rental assistance, ERA, and the Homeowners Assistance Fund.
And what did the auditors find there?
They concluded that OCA's recovery efforts were, and I'm quoting here, inefficient and ineffective. Crucially, they flagged $72 million in question costs that are just pending review.
$72 million sitting in limbo.
Right. It was likely overpaid or misallocated, but because of administrative delays, that money might never be recovered. It just shows whether it's a short-term program or a huge annual tax credit, the government really struggles with accountability.
So it's a crisis of cash flow and a crisis of consequence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've established the financial waste, the $21.4 billion hole. Let's pivot now to the policy side, because that money is being spent on policies that, according to the analysis we have, are failing. Specifically, let's talk about housing first.
Right. If you connect that financial waste to social policy, this is where it gets really interesting. The policy analysis we reviewed focuses squarely on housing first. This is the model that's been championed to, rapidly house homeless individuals without any prerequisites.
No strings attached, basically.
Exactly. Little to no immediate requirements for things like sobriety or mandatory work or even engaging with social services.
And what does the policy critique say is the outcome of removing those requirements?
The core argument is that by removing those requirements, the policy fails to restore self-sufficiency. Instead, it actually institutionalizes dependency. The analysis points to some very concrete outcomes. It argues the policy has led to higher homelessness rates and has contributed to significant social decay in major cities.
Okay, that's a strong claim. What's the evidence linking the policy to more homelessness?
Well, look at California. They've aggressively adopted this model, and they lead the nation in the homelessness crisis, despite spending a record $17 billion over 4 years to fight homelessness.
$17 billion.
Yeah. The state still saw a 50% increase in homelessness between 2014 and 2022. The critique uses that data to argue that just throwing money at the problem without an accountability structure, it just doesn't work.
So the argument is that the policy misdiagnoses the root cause.
That's the heart of it. The policy, according to critics, wrongly assumes homelessness is mainly a housing or a financial problem, that the solution is just a cheap apartment.
But the data suggests something else.
The data strongly suggests the issue is often behavioral and psychological. HUD's own figures show that at least 21% of the chronically homeless suffer from severe mental health issues. Chronic homelessness is intrinsically tied to disabling conditions, especially substance abuse.
So providing a subsidized apartment doesn't do anything to address the addiction or the mental health crisis that got the person there in the first place.
Exactly. The critique argues that any effective federal aid has to aim for restoring sobriety and self-sufficiency. When you provide housing without mandatory interventions, like treatment or job training, it just becomes a temporary shelter that, in effect, rewards dependency.
You can see that misalignment in the employment data, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. The data shows a stark picture. 45% of working-age adults who get housing assistance, they don't work at all during the month they get the benefit. If self-sufficiency is the goal, those numbers suggest the system is failing.
And that failure is incredibly expensive.
It's astonishingly expensive. Look at the absurdity in Los Angeles. The city uses motel rooms for homeless individuals that cost the taxpayer $111 per person per night.
Wait, $111 a night? That's over $40,000 a year per person.
Precisely. It's a huge price tag for a temporary fix. The critique is, what's the long-term benefit if treatment and training aren't required as part of that expensive housing? You're just funneling money into high-cost short-term arrangements.
And these policy failures seem to translate into this visible decay in communities.
That's the compounding effect. When federal policy lacks accountability and local governments won't enforce public order, the degradation spreads. The sources point to some alarming data from major cities. San Francisco, for example, saw a net loss of over 33,000 residents in just 1 year.
Are businesses leaving too?
Yes, the economic damage is profound. Downtown cell phone activity in San Francisco is still only at 32% of pre-COVID levels. That's a collapse in foot traffic, in business, in the tax base.
And it's not just San Francisco.
No. Portland, Oregon lost about 3% of its population as violent crime and hard drug use rose to record levels. The analysis suggests a direct line between policies that don't demand accountability and the deterioration of urban life.
Let's pull all these threads together then. What are the tangible consequences for you, the taxpayer, when spending is this loose and policy priorities ignore any sense of personal responsibility?
It's really twofold. You've got the financial harm and the community destruction. First, the financial distortion. Research shows that housing subsidies actually cause the people receiving them to pay higher rents.
How does that work?
Because the subsidy increases demand without increasing supply. Data from Washington, D.C. showed recurring rent overpayments with vouchers, sometimes up to 30% above market rent. That costs taxpayers an extra $567 a month per voucher. Your tax money is literally inflating the housing market.
And the community impact.
That's maybe the more insidious part. Expanding subsidized housing without mandatory accountability for things like sobriety, it risks hurting those neighborhoods with higher crime and lower property values. Studies show a clear link between neighborhoods with a high concentration of housing vouchers and increased rates of violent crime.
So the taxpayer is forced to fund the government's incompetence, the $21 billion waste, while also seeing their own community become less safe and more expensive. All because the policy prioritizes entitlement over accountability.
That's the summary from the critique, yes. When federal policy misdiagnoses the problem treating addiction and behavioral issues as just a lack of housing, it rewards dependency and, tragically, increases suffering, all funded by these massive, unrecovered taxpayer dollars.
So to recap this entire deep dive, we've uncovered billions in financial waste from unchecked tax credits. That's staggering $21.4 billion figure. And that waste is compounded by a social experiment, the Housing First model, which, according to the policy analysis, contributes to more homelessness and urban decay by refusing to link aid to personal responsibility.
And the financial failure is just immense. The Treasury's own Inspector General found the IRS needs to recover $11.7 billion just to get back under that 10% improper payment goal.
$11.7 billion. Just to be compliant with the law.
Just to hit the bare minimum.
And that leads us to the final provocative thought we want to leave with you today. If the federal government can't even secure the integrity of a basic tax credit system, which is legally bound to prevent this kind of loss, what confidence can any of us realistically have in these massive billion-dollar social programs that, by their very design, refuse to demand basic accountability from the people they're supposed to help? That's the question we have to grapple with.